Edwards. I am the founder and CEO at the E.WE Foundation. We are a healthcare advocacy organization. We facilitate resources for families living with rare disease Edwards syndrome, which is more commonly known as trisomy 18. I'm also a parent advocate. My fifth child, Elijah, was diagnosed in utero with full trisomy 18, and that really sparked my passion for advocacy and public policy. I'm really excited to be a part of today's conversation. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Nicole Boice, and I'm the founder and executive director of RareX, and have been an advocate in the rare disease space for quite a while, founding Global Genes over a decade ago. So it's really amazing to see how everything has evolved and the extraordinary team that is continuing to bring everything forward. Before Eric introduces himself, though, I was wondering if we could just give a round of applause to Rodney and the whole entire team that has put an extraordinary meeting together. Pam, Parvati, thank you.
Eric Marsh. I'm a pediatric neurologist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I'm the clinical director of the Orphan Disease Center, and I spend all of my time doing clinical work and research on rare neurogenetic conditions.
Great. Well, welcome. And so, like yesterday, my role is to serve as a gentle hand, gentle touch as a moderator. But I don't think this panel will need moderation because they have a lot to say about fostering collaboration. So let me just start with that primer. Fostering collaborations. How can we do things better together?
If I may, I was really reflecting on the last couple of days, and actually the last 5 to 7 years, and just how the role of advocacy has changed. And it's pretty extraordinary to look at the very first meeting that we had here with the Orphan Disease Center, and just to see how the content, the needs, the questions, the reflection, the science, the technology, everything has evolved. It looks like a totally different world today in orphan drug development. So we've been talking a lot about this new kind of advocacy 3.0 role and what that actually really means. And I think what was really clear today is that, you know, there's so much, there's very committed researchers, organizations, there's new tech and new science, like we said, that is just transforming the landscape. And it's almost overwhelming. And I was sitting back over the last couple of days thinking to myself, like, if I was sitting here driving efforts for a rare disease organization, like it's almost overwhelming. And not in a bad way, but I think what my takeaway from the last couple of days is that we all actually almost, I don't want to say have a lane, but have really distinct opportunities and roles that we can pursue. But we have to have faith and confidence that everyone else is going to be doing their job. The AI sessions, didn't even know some of the words that people were using and what they were describing. It was Greek in so many levels. But what was clear is that there's this extraordinary group of people and individuals and companies that are really, really committed to transforming the landscape. And we have to believe that they're going to be doing this to kind of support what's next. So or what we saw is, I think, a couple of things. A, the future is all about data. It's all about helping ensure that we as patients can really usher forward what's next. And then it was about the types of data. And it was about the types of collaborations that you need to bring forward. And there, it's definitely not easy, and there's a lot there. But I just think, I think the biggest takeaway right now for me, and interested to hear what you guys think too, is just that, you know, there's so much opportunity. There's a lot of burden because we know that everyone has extraordinary lives that they're living with a lot of weight. But I think there was so much optimism about, you know, what's ahead, and just I think it's becoming clear. I think we're beyond that patients, should we have a voice, and what does that voice look like? Like, we're beyond that. That was like last century. Now it's about, you know, we are at the table. We play a very distinct and very important role. And so now it's, how do we do that, and how do we bring it forward? And there's clearly lots of tools and opportunities here. So it's been overwhelming, but also really inspiring. And there's just, I feel like there's a lot of optimism out there, but it's a lot. So.
You know, well, I would say, using the analogy of staying in your lane, I think when you think about every stakeholder has their own role, if you will, but if you're traveling to a destination, there's so many different lanes you can take to get there. And so I do agree that everybody has their own individual lane and their own mode, but it should all still lead to the same destination, you know, because that's the overall goal, and that's that's for the patient community. And so I think it's really important that that even in knowing which lane belongs to each individual stakeholder, they know what that lane represents for them. And then every other stakeholder understands how that lane contributes to reaching the the end point. I think it's really important that, you know, when we speak about collaborations, I think it's really important that everybody understand what all the stakeholders can bring to the table. And I think sometimes that's dismissed or overlooked, especially when you talk about research or when you talk about investments and all the language that patient organizations are looking for to find cures and research opportunities and trials and different things. I think it's important for everybody to understand that even though we all bring something different to the conversation, everybody's voice, kind of like the presentation that we just had, everybody's voice plays a role in reaching that end point. And so I absolutely agree that everybody's role is different, but the overarching goal is to get to the same end point. And so I think it's really important that we keep that at the forefront.
Yeah, so, you know, from what Nicole was saying of the transformation over the years, when I started in residency just a few years ago, there was, you know, people were like, why are you doing child neurology? You can't do anything for anybody, you can't help anybody. And now thinking about cures is actually on the table. So, you know, in a few years, a tremendous transformation of the space, both clinically and research-wise. And from what started as mostly physician-driven kind of programs till parents and advocates coming on board and pushing people to now where there are multiple domains of people getting involved and trying to move the science and the clinical work forward has really been transformative. But, you know, the topic of this, of fostering collaborations, one of the things is that I still need to do and need to improve is all understand each other's perspective, because in some ways we are in different lanes, and I think we can improve that collaboration and aid in moving forward if we really understand each other's perspectives better and what each of our strengths are and our limitations are, and, you know, how we could be of help and how we can't be of help, and all those types of things that I think there are some preconceived beliefs about what a physician can do or what a researcher can do or what an advocate could do. And I think we need to kind of deconstruct that a little bit in order to build it back up so that we can be more efficient and more successful in our collaborations. Because frequently people say, we're going to collaborate, and then it never goes anywhere. And so we got to stop that from happening and figure out a way to always move these types of things forward. So I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think we find ourselves in conversations where we know the focus is collaboration. We know the value of collaborations. We say that we are collaborators, yet we're not collaborating. And so I think we find ourselves just talking about it more so than actually doing it. And I agree. I think we have to move away from that and and actually create those opportunities and then actually implement and execute. So I agree 100% with that statement.
And I would say defining collaboration, because a lot of people say, let's collaborate, and that means come into my world and I will share what I do with you, versus collaboration as in co-creation, right? And I think what you're describing is really about, you know, co-creation. It's understanding, like you said, people's perspectives, respecting them, integrating them. But I did want to also say, when I said in our lanes, I didn't mean that we have like a narrow focus.
No.
It's just, I think what I was feeling over the last day is that there's so much work to do, and there's so much opportunity. And if we think that we can go and tackle it all, we're never going to get anywhere. So it's almost like having faith. It's like running a business, right? You have people that do different things, run different departments and divisions, and you have to have faith that they're going to be able to like hold on to their end of it, right? And I think we have to start believing in that. I think I was blown away by a lot of it is the people that are here, right? Yesterday there was a comment about biopharma at the table, and those that are here because actually they believe everything that is being said. They believe that patients should be at the center. They believe that we could be doing better. They believe that. So in that spirit, it's like we have to believe that there's a lot of good people and good companies that are working to change things and really usher forward what's next. And if we believe in that, and then we can take on our very, important role and do that well, we might be able to really kind of make that change that we know needs to happen. So I just I didn't mean like a lane like.
No, yeah. I totally understood what you mean. I think that's a really great perspective. I know one of the sessions that I was in on yesterday, the conversation was talking about some type of research toolkit that can be broken down for patient advocates to better understand, which I think is a great idea. That's something that I would sort through just because I love to learn things that I don't know. But I think the real takeaway is recognizing that a lot of patients and advocates and families, they're not going to understand how to utilize that. So I think that's a really good point that you just brought out, that it's really important that those tools and resources are available for patient organizations, but understanding that there is someone maybe better capable to take that information and help those patient organizations utilize it. And so because I'm not a researcher, I wouldn't put up the effort to research. I would bring in a researcher, and to me, that's staying in my lane. You know what I mean? So I do agree with you 100% with that.
Just thinking about, if I could interject here, when you say, so you're not a researcher, but you would bring in one, and it just brings to mind some of the questions that, as each of the different representatives of stakeholder groups ask. So I'm not I'm not a fundraiser. So how do I distinguish somebody who is a good fundraiser versus a mediocre one? And the same thing goes for a researcher. And I think, how would one go about distinguishing or delineating which person might be more suited for your questions or goals?
So for me, I really start with having conversations. I really start with having conversations and trying to build relationships. And if I have the opportunity to meet a researcher, I try to share the type of ideas that we're thinking. I know Eric pointed out something in our planning call that a lot of times patient organizations, they have this broad scope of what they want to do, and they invest a lot of time and effort and money and then realize that's not viable for their disease group. And I think those are steps that me specifically, we're trying to avoid. And so I think when seeking out a researcher or a fundraiser or whomever you may need to try and collaborate and co-create with, I think it starts with having conversations, honest, transparent conversations about your goals and what you're looking for, to see if that person aligns with your mission. I think, there is an urgency in the rare disease community, and we are hurriedly looking for solutions. But I think a lot of times when you move too fast, you end up backtracking because you've moved too fast. And so I think you have to take those baby steps sometimes to figure out if this person is a good fit for my organization, if they align with our mission and our goals, if that conversation aligns with what we're trying to achieve, and then you move to the next conversation. And so, that's what I would say. It really starts with relationship building. I'm a strong believer in it's not about opportunities and creating opportunities. It's about building relationships that lead to opportunities. And so that's my perspective there.
Yeah, I think that is, Rodney's question of how do you know who's good or who's bad. I think, unfortunately, sometimes you don't. Mm-hmm. And, success, of people who've had success, people think automatically they're going to be good and they're going to have success again. But that isn't necessarily true, because success in one domain doesn't necessarily mean success in another domain. So I think having conversations and knowing what people can actually do and not asking too much of somebody, like, oh, go raise $10 million. Well, can you really raise $10 million? No, probably not. But if that's the ask, then you can't do it, and it's never going to go anywhere. Or to ask a clinician to go get 300 patients with a rare disease and collect all this data and get MRIs and all this, they can't do it, right? They're having trouble doing it, but yet everyone goes to the table with this idea that we can do all this right away and right now. And some of these things you have to start small and have little successes, show that you can collaborate, show that you can produce something, and then use that to build. And there's a lot of, from the clinician and the scientist side, there's a lot of young clinicians and scientists who want to get involved, but they don't have, they haven't success, they haven't done it. So there's some, leap of faith with some of these individuals to give them a chance. But, from the foundation organization side, quickly you need to show that they can actually produce or do something. Otherwise, you'll just flounder for a long time. So I think there has to be kind of an iteration of interaction, transparency and talking, and then have an endpoint, have a goal, see if you can make it, and then if you can't, go back. But then make these realistic, because goals of having a hospital who has only seen a few patients of a particular rare disease, all of a sudden going to see 50, that's not realistic. Start with 5, do something realistic, and then build from there and move from there as a way to open this kind of conversation about, being honest about what we all can do for each other.
Yeah, I think realistic expectations. I think that also what supports kind of building that mindset and that approach is, which I don't think we really have yet, is a real almost roadmap right now, right? Again, I keep reflecting on just the amount of information that, we all learned over the last couple days and opportunities. And I think what we really need to maybe work on together is building out, I know that there's research roadmaps and there's frameworks for that, but I think there's, we keep talking about the new tech, new science, new opportunities, new approaches with clinical research, researchers. That's a lot for everyone in this room to really embrace, understand the role that they play and in what capacity when. And I think we all patients can be better partners. This is a research and drug development symposium, right? Since our roles as patients are evolving, have changed, have become more important, more critical, we as industry in the ecosystem then have to do a better job of really helping describe what, when, and where, right? Because, and then in setting ourselves up to be able to pressure test, right, approaches, like you said, let's try something, with a few patients, or, this particular approach, scientific approach, et cetera. And then the last thing I'll say, and then you want to, is that there's also, I had some conversations with some of the companies here, And there's a lot of new science out there, and sometimes if it's CRISPR, everyone thinks, oh yeah, well, that's gonna be able to cure every disease. But actually, there's companies that are starting and working in different areas and focused areas, whether it's disease or domain. And I think if we could also help really roadmap who's doing what, and then not, be able to go to Eric when it's appropriate and relevant because it's something that you're focused on, you've had success in. How do we build that? Because I think our goal is to streamline this process for everyone because it's so overwhelming.
Yeah, to be a little bit of a devil's advocate, there needs to be a roadmap, but what I think we're learning from the experiences and looking at the successes, but also the failures out there, is that this is definitely not a one-size-fits-all enterprise for anybody, and that two diseases that could seem rather similar might have very different approaches that you need to take. Even potentially two mutations in the same gene could have potentially different approaches that you need to take. So there needs to be kind of an overall framework that there's points and that you get to where you say, yes, no, is this for my disease, is this for my condition, and then move forward, and what are the options, with a lot of flexibility in this framework. I think a lot of people think of roadmap, and they think of, go from point A to point B to point C, but so far in my experience, it's not an A to B, a C. It's an A to A1, back to A, to B, back to A1, right? And it's more Google Maps that gives you 26 different options. Do you want to take the toll road, right? Do you want to take the non-toll road? Scenic, not scenic, which way do you want to go? Of course, no one here wants to take the scenic way. We want to all get the fastest way there. But I think, built into these roadmaps has to be a lot of flexibility and, and realism of not necessarily that this is going to take you there, because we don't know any of these things are going to take us there. And the fact that SMA was so successful and it worked so well doesn't necessarily mean the next thing is going to work so well. So we really have to be careful about that in building the infrastructure that allows everyone to move forward. So there needs to be a lot of flexibility in there.
So then how does one safeguard against potential pitfalls, not knowing all of these things that are coming ahead? Let's say a hole in the street, right? You're driving.
Well, one of course would be not putting all your eggs in one basket, like taking multiple different approaches simultaneously. I think the biggest thing is don't just think, oh, AI is going to solve your data problem. Like it might, but it might not. Or that gene therapy is going to be your solution. That I think thinking about many different ways, and even taking a step back and saying maybe we're learning so much about diseases based upon what we know clinically, what we can learn from large data sets, thinking about therapies that are disease modification or just to improve quality of life as steps towards that process, and not always trying to jump right to the end, because that might be harder than we think. So going slow and thinking about ways you can do other things besides just a cure, even though of course we all want a cure, but it's complicated. And so I think having these types of conversations to say, hey, what, from a clinician's point of view or a research point of view, what is that first step? And how many different ways can we take that first step?
Can I bring up the sense of urgency, as you had mentioned, going slow? And I hear that, I think of some of the parents that I've spoken with who have children that will not live to see the age of 10, say, for example.
Right.
So that's a very unique situation. How does one navigate or shape that roadmap with respect to these very urgent conditions that need to be considered?
It's a great point that the urgency level is very different for very different diseases. So that would be one of the things where maybe you do shoot for a potential cure, but also think about ways to potentially prolong life or improve quality of life while you're trying to get to that cure. So to still be flexible in thinking about what would be a way to dramatically improve the outcome, but at the same time realizing that if you put all your eggs in one basket, you can have a lot of broken eggs. So it's hard, and I think to think that it's not hard and it's not a challenge, as a physician, it's horrible to tell a family your kid's not going to live past this. It tears a little bit out of you every time you do it. And so it's difficult, but we have to be realistic too, that, if you throw all of your money and everything into one thing, it could fail. And so you don't want organizations to do that. Like, I hate to see when organizations I'm going to do all this. Like, it might not work, and you don't want, to say that. People don't like when you say that, but sometimes you do have to say that.
I think too, that's a reality that so many of us face. But I think we have to understand and recognize that even with that truth, that doesn't mean that the urgency isn't present. There's still a process, and as much as we know that our children are living with life-limiting diagnoses, and longevity for a lot of us isn't guaranteed. To me, that doesn't mean that there isn't an urgency for the physicians and the researchers that I speak with. I would much rather they put a lot of effective effort in figuring out what I'm dealing with than piece a few things together and I still get nowhere. You know what I mean? So I think as parents, it's difficult for you to say, it's difficult for us to hear. But I think for me specifically, I'm talking about me, I would much rather have effective conversations and solutions than something super quick to say that we've done something and we've really gotten nowhere.
I agree. I think it's just the word slow.
Right.
And so I think if we can maybe rephrase that to mindful or intentional, approaches to things, right? Because you don't just want to jump in blind, and you don't want to have unrealistic expectations, and we know it's super complex, but, I think that's why, and maybe roadmap's not the right term either, but I think our goal is how can we help accelerate the process the best that we can, right? And be mindful and intentional about it. And if we have a plan and a process that we know is going to have to evolve and be customized for our disease, our family, our individual situation, at least there's that protocol or that plan, right? Like I remember a long time ago we talked about, there was this extraordinary, and I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but there was this extraordinary ad that was run in the UK with this dad whose child had a very rare, devastating disease. And he ran an ad that became very controversial. This was about over a decade ago. And it said it was him, the back of him holding his son, and his son, you could see his little face. And the ad said, "I wish my child had cancer." And then on the bottom, in the very small font, it explained why. But it was captivating. It caused a huge uproar. But it basically said, there's a plan and a process, at least, from treatment, therapy, there's a plan. And so I think for rare disease, 10,862 now, by the way, make sure you get our little card in the report. I think we can't have like you said, it isn't one thing. But if there's a framework that can be developed so that we can accelerate and streamline and at least have those next steps a little more clearly defined, we can become better partners because, we know how to approach looking for the right clinical researchers. We know maybe what science and research and tech might be the best path for our particular condition. So if we can help create that infrastructure that's going to ease those collaborations and make them more relevant more quickly, we might be able to accelerate stuff faster.
Yeah, and I think too, acceleration, it doesn't mean fast. We're gonna find a solution super quick. Acceleration means we're understanding faster than we would have. And so, You know, I think sometimes we hear that term and we think accelerate, we're going to accelerate this, we're going to accelerate that. That means that all of the other things are kind of washed away. We know how to get there super, super quick. But but acceleration, especially in this space, it just means that we're understanding and we're getting there faster than we would have normally. And I think that's, you know, that's just a takeaway I think we have to have, and an understanding that that even if we are accelerating the process, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's removing some of the time away from the effort.
Yeah, I think those are both two wonderful points, that it is, you know, we are sometimes limited by the words that we choose, and roadmap is the word we all use, and it, you know, really, right, three-dimensional, multi-dimensional roadmap for everybody, harder to say, harder to put on the bottom of a poster. And moving things forward with expediency and with urgency is what we all want and what we're all trying to do. But, you know, as we're talking about, but to be really clear about what all where the hurdles are, where we have to pivot are in this process, so that no one's left feeling disappointed by their interaction. You know, and I think you get a lot of people who try to collaborate, who come in and they're not co-creating, but they're trying to get together, and they all walk away disappointed. I've heard a lot of people talk about disappointing collaborations and interactions between physicians, between foundations, between organizations, companies, and, you know, I think if we go in with this type of more open, multidimensional approach, there'll be less of those disappointments, and just realizing that sometimes things might not necessarily go where you want to go.
Well, they probably more often than not don't go exactly as
Right,
planned.
right.
A couple of things that we heard also was, and just I think you and I talked about the takeaways were around communication, like how critical that is, and this also could help support what you were talking about in terms of building this relationship, that two-way communication, the transparency throughout, and then I loved on the first panel when Paul Howard and Craig, you guys talked about holding industry and researchers accountable. But if you're building that trusted, open, communicative collaboration, right? You're at the table together for the good, the bad, the ugly,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, not everything's going to go well all the time, but that relationship, right? Which we wouldn't even have been talking about this 10 years ago.
Right.
So the opportunities are there.
No, that's true, right? We're all going to be there together for whatever happens, and that, you know, we just need to be open about that, and, you know, hold people accountable in some sense too. That if someone doesn't do what they're going to say, let them know, you know, try to hold them accountable to some way. Though sometimes there is no accountability across these lanes,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
So we've learned two bad words today. Yesterday and today, F, failures, right? So we want to rebrand that to missteps, and S, slow, should be mindfulness. Okay. There's one thing that I've heard yesterday through various attendees and SMEs, but also today, or I would say the absence of it, is funding. What are your thoughts about that? So a lot of the collaborative efforts require funds and require, another bad word, money. People don't like to talk about this, right? But it's true. You have to have the funds to do the work. You have to have an excellent research coordinator, for example, who won't just leave at the drop of a dime because now there's another position offered elsewhere with higher salary or pay. And that leads to clinical trials being stalled, for example, or studies. Any thoughts?
Yes, we need more money.
Yeah, I mean, that is obvious.
But yeah, no, I mean, this goes again to the transparency and the openness of discussing really what people's needs are. You know, clinicians and researchers do a lot of volunteer time where they spend a lot of their time that's unpaid and uncovered. and their boss, their division chief, their department chair is asking them, why are you doing this? Why get more funding for this? But it doesn't. It's hard to get, and so I think as a group, as an area of research as rare disease, of trying to figure out how to advocate for the NIH, for the government, for philanthropy, to kind of realize the real need here. And I think people do realize the need, but it's still small compared to cancer, and to a lot of other conditions that are out there that it's relatively, with 10,200 disorders, 10,800 disorders, it's way underfunded for what the need is.
I would just say, I think, I mean, in any industry and every not-for-profit in any sector, I mean, there's always a need for funding. I think what I've personally learned is that we are in a metrics-driven world, and funders want to see outcomes, and they want to know that the money that you're leveraging or asking for has like a clear path to an outcome. So I remember a very wise woman, Pat Furlong from PPMD, said a long time ago, when we were having a conversation about just communicating and partnering and collaborating, and how to kind of create that relationship and provide those that you're working with what they need. And it was about, she said, for FDA, for funders, it was almost about quantifying tears, right? It's about quantifying what it is that you are doing, what you need to accomplish, what the outcomes are. And the more that you can package that in that way and hand it to a funder, they want to fund success, right? They want to fund something that is going to move the needle. And so if you can package these requests in those ways, they're going to more likely feel that, it's a good investment. And so I guess that would be my advice, right? Is that as the ecosystem's becoming more sophisticated, the role of patient advocacy is becoming more sophisticated, the collaborations are more complex and sophisticated, so we as patient advocates have to rise, right? And I just want to give props to a couple people that are here. Vanessa Vogel-Farley, who serves a million roles and hats, works with RareX, but also works with ESA on this extraordinary collaboration called, if I get it right, the Coalition for Complex Copy Number Variants. And to see just the extraordinary collaboration, the work, the sophistication, how they're bringing this forward, how they're out pitching it, what the outcomes are. I mean, it is extraordinary. And, I just think back to a decade ago, and, in the very first conference that Global Genes ever hosted, we were sitting together around the table, arm in arm, talking about how patient advocates can just, collaborate around how to get through the day better, right? And so to see this extraordinary advancement is amazing. So we as patients have moved from, the feel good, the love and hugs, to sophisticated and vital partners in this process. And so I think the education, the needs are to even raise the bar in how we approach even asking for money. And so again, that's just my.
Yeah.
But don't forget the love and hugs.
The love and hugs, yes.
Yeah. I think when it comes to the conversation of funding, because I agree, I think people shy away from asking. I think people shy away from giving. But I think it starts with the conversation again. I think in order to have the pretty package of this is what we're asking for and why we're asking for it, and these are our goals, I think we have to have those conversations proactively so we can present that. If I were to go to a funder now with my preliminary thoughts of research, they probably put me out. Well, me, probably not. but they put most people out, because I think we go in with what our anticipated goals are. They're not even realistic at that point. It's just our thoughts. And so we need the researcher to help us develop that proposal or that blueprint so we can take it to a funder. And in a lot of instances, I would want the researcher to come with me. I would, because again, this is a language that isn't mine. This is not conversation that I may be able to sophisticatedly, if that's a word, have. You can speak it so much better than I could. So I think for me, I would put up the effort to build my team and be clear that the whole goal for this is to try to get this funding. And then I would ask that team to approach those funders with me, is the approach that I would take. Because again, I think, a lot of the times when it comes to funding research and it comes to funding a lot of the projects that we're trying to do, the people that you're going to, they know that language already. And so to walk into that space without a person who can speak it, to me is a downfall for me and my organization. So that's time wasted when I can just proactively say, hey, Eric, this is what we're trying to do. Can you assist with me? So I think it just really starts with building those relationships. And even if Eric isn't my researcher, for example, I would trust that the relationship that we've built, he can connect me with the right person. He can help me speak this language to a potential funder. And so I do agree that it's a part of that education piece too, recognizing when I've swerved into somebody else's lane, and I need to create that space for them to come back and parallel with me. I think that's important to know when you need that help and support, and not be afraid to ask somebody for it. That's how you secure solid funding, I think.
And this goes both directions because, most clinicians and scientists don't know how to ask for money, right? And when they do, they ask for way less than they probably should be asking. And there are some physicians and scientists who've gotten very good at it and are expert at it, but most aren't. And that we all could learn from you guys to say, how does one ask? And what is the right words to use? We can provide the science and a scientific plan or a clinical plan, but how does one really ask for money? Because we don't do it very well.
See, that's why we could totally tag team, because you've got the language and I'm not afraid to ask. That's crazy.
I would also say aligning, really understanding the needs of everyone that's coming to the table, right? So we talk a lot about, even though we think everyone should just be giving money because it's the right thing to do, I think understanding what's in it for me, right? What does industry need? What do researchers and academic researchers and clinicians need? And if you can build in that win-win across the board, really, whether you inherently believe it or not, that we heard yesterday about the publication and just how important that is. Whether you inherently, David Feigenbaum said, he's like, it kills me to say this, but this is the reality, right? So understanding that reality and building those collaborations that meet the goals of industry, right? They need outcomes. Meeting the goals of you and the patient community and all the stakeholders, I think, is really important to build that successful partnership, right, across the board, and then be able to secure, funding and everything that you need to move it forward.
I'm a big advocate for team science and team everything, but often we hear that the 80-20 rule, I would say, is now becoming even more so 95-5, right, where 95% of the work is being done by 5% of the group. How would you advise new advocacy groups or even more seasoned ones to really revive or reinvigorate or just try to put fresh life into ensuring that path together as a team? And whether it be researchers, advocacy groups, as a collaboration forms, how do we keep that sustainable?
I mean, I just think, like what we just described, if the people at the table all have goals that need to be met, right, and that we're all have open communication and we have a framework on how that collaboration will look, everyone has to play their part in the role. So you don't have room to have. I mean, I think that happens a lot, in work streams and work groups and things like that. But when we're talking about, bringing forward research, you're not going to have anyone on your team that's not pulling their weight. So I don't know, I would say, find the right partners. Yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, it's a challenge, right? Everyone wants, right, there are rare cases where people are just slackers and they should just be let go right away, and you figure out who they are and move on without them. But, what are the hurdles, right? So to having that discussion of why aren't you, why is only a small part of the group moving this forward? Why are the rest of the people not able to produce what they say they're produce or what they're going to do? What is stopping them? What is preventing them from doing that? And, Ben, I guess, a lot of this comes back to really having sometimes difficult conversations about what's not working and what is. And, oh, wait, we said we could do this for $10,000, but it turns out it's actually going to cost more like $40,000. We can't do it for 10. And it's hard to say that, or to say that this is not going to turn out to be a publication, and therefore it's not really worth my while from a academic physician point of view. Yes, it's worth my while from helping this cause, but these are where these things get conflicting and difficult. And so trying to figure out, why people aren't contributing, why it's 95.5 is kind of the first step. And then more love and hugs, because that will move everything forward.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you said earlier about just making sure the roles are clearly defined, making sure those expectations are there, and people know what's expected. And I think that helps with those difficult conversations. I don't think it really makes it less difficult, but I think it helps in terms of accountability when expectations are clear. I think it's easier to say, the why behind this and ask those questions. Why haven't you delivered? Because let's be realistic. We all have worked with someone who did not pull their weight, and so we know the challenges that presents for the rest of the team, whether this was in this not-for-profit life or in your life before. Everybody's had that slacker on the job, and so I think a lot of times when someone isn't pulling their weight, it's because nobody's brave enough to say something. And I think we have to get away from feeling like holding people accountable is a bad thing, because it's not. You're holding a person accountable for what they said they contribute is responsible. And I think we have to do more of that in order to achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve.
You almost need like a manifesto that says, coming into the collaboration, we're going to mindfully develop what it is that we want to develop. Take the time on the front end, but recognize that if it's not moving forward, maybe the best approach is to stop, right, and pivot or make the change, or but be honest about it, right? So I think. I don't know. Yeah.
But to clarify, when you say stop that progress there, not necessarily splinter and create another group. I guess that was another question I was going to ask later.
So you're talking about
as a team, as you're moving forward, and if you hit a roadblock and you say, well, okay, we'll happily just separate and be cordial about it. But if it's for example, a patient advocacy group in which there are, in our prep call, we also talked about egos. So for example, if there were egos that were kind of at conflict in terms of where the group was headed, they end up splitting. How do you manage these types of difficult conversations? And look, I'm already provoking, like thought-provoking, right?
Well, I mean, let's face it, this has been a challenge in rare disease forever, but I don't even think it's just rare disease. I think it's across the ecosystem. It's really hard to be a collaborator, and it's really hard, it's very hard to, collaboration is hard. And I think you said a word a few minutes ago about being brave. You know, sometimes it is about compromise. Sometimes it is about finding lanes. I think, you know, if we believe inherently that everyone is well-intentioned, right, and working towards that same goal, and if we can honestly, you know, there's always a million different personalities and, you know, people that don't get along, but if our goal is the same and we can put a stake in the ground and agree that this is the end game for our disease area, for the ecosystem, and understand that there's going to be your path and maybe other paths, but that you have to commit to finding ways to move forward. You might not even like each other, but if you can commit and agree on that end game, then you might be able to make it happen. Because you're right. I mean, Rodney, this is so makes it so hard for our community. Like the disease areas are too small to have things become fractured so early on. Is just, if you truly are about the patient and the community and that end goal, then you got to get over some of that early ego, and you have to figure out and work extra hard to figure out how to collaborate.
And I think with that is that everyone has to know that we're all better off working together than we are apart. And that having multiple organizations go at the same thing just dilutes the money, it dilutes the talent, it dilutes everything. And getting people together to do it, even if there are disagreements, work through those disagreements instead of rebuilding on your own. And, you know, easy for us to say up here. But I really do think it's an important aspect of this that we all know we're all trying to go for that same goal, and getting there all together is going to be much more likely than getting there separately.
I mean, I'll give you a case in point. There was a disease community that was very fractured. There was like 6 different orgs, and everyone hated each other. And I mean, this was like a decade ago. And we brought everyone together with the intention of having leadership from each of the areas, and we were going to map. Well, first of all, they had to come into this meeting with an understanding of what they believed their core value was, and then what the other organization's core values were. And the goal in that meeting was to sit and then map out, like, who does what, right? Like who did this, who did that well. And by the end of the day, they didn't hate each other anymore. And they also saw that there were actually, sure that there's some overlap, but there were some core pieces or core work streams that each of them actually all agreed that they were better equipped to tackle. And so they walked out of that meeting feeling a little better about, wow, maybe we could actually find those channels or those lanes where we could take that, you know, and move that forward. You guys do this and work really hard on the relationship piece. But let's face it, and I'm going to cuss, there's a shit ton of work to do out there.
It's a real
and,
curse word.
you know, to think that one organization is going to do it all, like, we're kidding ourselves. So, like, really, you actually want more people coming to the table, because now you're going to be able to attack things together, right?
Yes.
But then the key to that is, multiple organizations, but that they're communicating, right?
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
That they're not stepping on each other's toes, not fighting for the same pot, not, you know. So I think, it's fine to call yourself X and call yourself Y, as long as X, Y come together to know what they're doing, so that they're not reduplicating efforts.
And I
So
think
I was going to ask Nicole, they exist today? I mean, that
They
example?
do,
or-
actually,
okay. Okay.
actually they do.
Yeah.
There was one that like really was focused more on the research. There was one that was became more focused on like the family conferences and that. There was one then that was really focused on the social media and the kind of the broader ecosystem. Like it actually was, it worked out. It was pretty extraordinary. So, yeah.
Well, I think when you see situations like that, sometimes it takes a mediator to kind of bring that together. But that's how we are as people. We prejudge, or we have biases, or we don't like something or someone, and we've never even established a relationship or took the time to talk to them. And so I think that's a great example of a bunch of different organizations who didn't like each other, but when they sat down and actually had a healthy conversation, realized that we don't have to like each other to respect each other. We don't have to like each other to work together. We don't have to like each other to reach a goal. And I think that's what we have to take away from a lot of this. That if you find yourself in a place where you have to dissolve that relationship, that doesn't mean you're a terrible person. That just means we can't work together for this goal, for this project. And I think you have to be okay with saying that. But in the same regard, I think it's very important to put the effort up to build relationships with organizations that you may not would have otherwise. And if that's something you feel you cannot do, have a mediator to come in and kind of serve as the unbiased voice to figure out what we all can do together. Super important.
Yeah. The other thing, back to that, I think it's also important, going back to just how much work there is to be done. I think that, oh my God, I just totally forgot what I was going to say.
I do that all the time.
I know. I'm 55 now, so that's what happens.
It's
God
okay.
dang it.
Well, we have 5 more minutes.
Okay.
And
Well,
go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, maybe this will remind you, spark you what you were thinking. But, I think a good kind of analogy of this group splitting and is, with families or with divorce, where you don't want both people buying the child the same shirt, right? They don't need two of the same shirt. They need to figure out and there needs to be communication amongst the parents to make sure that the child thrives and does their best. And I think with these groups, if you can't get along, okay, but then figure out how to still work together,
Right.
or at least work in a way that you're advancing the cause, that you're really trying to help everything move forward.
Yeah. I mean, so thank you. I was just going to say that one word. I think every single person in this room right now has the same goal and the same intention. And it might be for different kids, diseases, research efforts, et cetera. But we all want to create forward progress. We want to help support patients and kids and families. We're all driving towards that. And maybe it's us, kind of sitting in that truth, everyone, and kind of bringing that forward to say, I'm going to partner with people who are intentioned, similarly, who, create that manifesto for yourself and your organization and just lay it out there, These are our beliefs. This is who we work with. This is who we want to work with. These are our intentions. We're going to cut bait early. If it's not working, it's all good, right? Because we don't have time. But let's be open and honest about it. And because we don't have enough time to waste. And, everyone's on that, driving path. So maybe that's what we all need to do, I think we did try to do that a couple years ago with an effort called Thrive. It was with Child Neurology Foundation and Global Genes, and it was really about that. It was about really intentionally bringing together those that you want in your orbit, that you are aligned around. It doesn't mean that you can't work with others, but it's just it's a clear, I don't know, statement of how
Purpose,
and who
yeah.
you want to work together. Yeah.
So for next steps, what would you like to personally see come out of this conference? What would you tell the attendees? Anyone? Yeah.
Well, I
Okay.
guess, that everyone knows what everyone else is doing, and that have the ability to communicate across to pharma, to industry, to the same thing, to foundations, to clinician scientists, to advocates, that you know how to communicate, you know how to talk, so that you can come up with a plan to develop a drug, a treatment, a purpose that will move care forward for whatever rare disease that you're, striving to do for.
Yeah. I think my first thought was, we say we're the rare disease community. And so I think we should take away that a community is built up of so many different people, and we all bring so many different things to the space. And so I think, I would want, folks to take away that if you as an organization have a need, see who's in the community who can fill that need for you, and don't be afraid to reach out to them. If you have questions about a process that you're working on, you don't know which direction to go, and you just want a mentor or some advice, reach out to someone in the community. I think a lot of times, we in a community, they're neighbors, and we'll wave when we see each other, but we won't ask for a cup of sugar or eggs. And I think we have to be okay with saying, can I borrow a cup of sugar? Can I borrow a couple of eggs? I think community is supposed to be family, right? Like it's supposed to be a place of comfort, and I would say that's the goal for the people within the community, to feel like they can get the resources and the support that they need from other people in their community. So I would say, number one, be encouraged, and don't be afraid to seek other people in this community for things that you need for your organization. Let them help you, and let them help direct you to other people if they are not the ones to do so.
Yeah, I would just say, I think it's so clear, and Marina, like even one of your last slides where you had all the stakeholders across in these blocks, and every single stakeholder had the exact same size box. Patients weren't on the end or off to the side, they were in the middle. I think for the first time, it is 100% clear that the role and the vital incorporation of patient report data, patients driving early stage research, it's just, patients have arrived as vital partners and contributors and drivers. And so my hope for, this point forward is that we continue to see or be able to help create more opportunities, better support and infrastructure, and guidance, so that the rock star patient advocates that are sitting here doing all of this extra lift, have what you need to help be successful, because everyone has a role. And we all need to be successful together. And so we need to make sure that you have what you need as a clinical researcher, right? That you have what you need as a patient. And so we have to do a good job ensuring that everyone is well equipped, to go out there and do you. And so it's scary, overwhelming, super inspiring, and I think the future just looks a little brighter, because I think there's been, over the last decade, a lot of fight and a lot of people trying to pave the way to be here today. And so now we're here. What was discussed at this forum was extraordinary, right? The opportunities are there, the science, the tech, the support, right? So now we just need to put it together in a way that makes sense and takes some of the burden off of everything that patients have to do, but so that you can go forward and rock the world, because we need to.
Well, we'll take questions now. We have about 10 minutes from the audience. Q&A, please.
It's kind of a vague question, but I loved something you said. We have to be willing to pressure test approaches. And I've thought about how I have been to a few of these now global genes, and there's a lot of like announcements of this is something cool that we're trying, or this, like even the 5 voices, right? And I think there's less of a coming back and saying what worked, what didn't work, like a postmortem. And I don't really know, maybe it's almost like publishing negative data for efforts. I wonder if it's time to start doing some of that, right? And I don't know what it looks like, and maybe it's not really sexy because it's negative results kind of aren't, but I think it would be an interesting lesson learned. Like have there been times that you've ever brought 6 rare disease organizations to the table and it was like, oh man, it was a food fight, right? And then why did it go poorly? So I guess, I don't know, is it time maybe to get some of those stories out too, and what would that look like?
Vanessa Vogel-Farley, when we were talking about, just on the research side, yesterday, publishing, some of the failed data or trials or lessons learned, like she was like, yes, hell yes, we need to be doing this. Listen, if this is the decade of truth, right, and we're trying to create a different world for ourselves, then I think it's absolutely important that we figure out how to do that, right? And maybe not say failures, but maybe lessons learned, right? And, since it's about words, so go ahead.
No, absolutely, it's needed across the board, right? It's needed from the basic science experiment that doesn't fit, that fails, so that people don't, why did it fail? What were the issues? And so that people don't spend money and time on doing it again. From clinical, where someone looks at a bunch of patient data and says, I don't really get anything from this, that they get that out there, right? Oh, there's no patterns, there's nothing here that we could see. Maybe someone else will look at it and see something, maybe they won't, but at least we'll know what's happening. And then from an organizational point of view, that, hey, we try to fund this, we try to do this, and it didn't work, and why didn't it work? And people don't like to use the words failures and things, but it's okay. Things fail, right? But why did it fail? So, but how does the question becomes, where do you put this, right? So from a science side, there is no journal of irreproducible results. There is no journal of failed experiments. There should be, but there's not. And, and from organizations, where is the graveyard of failed foundations and why they failed, and that it needs to be out there, and where do we do it? I think this is the conversation this community needs to have about where you put this stuff. And again, there's more money, right? There's still, if it's on a website, someone needs to fund that website, and so we're like, where do you do this? How do you do this? It's needed, but I'm just not. The question is how.
One, I'm gonna create that journal. I'm Vanessa, by the way. I'm
You have a
creating that
writer
journal.
right over here too, Danny. He can
Yeah,
help.
I'm creating that journal. The question, so the panel was great, but I kind of want to push Dr. Marsh a little bit. I think that we talk about collaborating a lot across advocacy, but I want to get your insight, or actually maybe the group wants to get your insight. How do you approach collaboration amongst researchers and clinicians? Because I think sometimes for us it's a black box when you're in the advocacy realm. Because I don't want to give your answer for you, but I know that you guys collaborate on the backside. What does that look like when you talk about these collaborations? Are there food fights amongst researchers when they're arguing about one thing?
Yeah, no, it's a challenge, right? Just collaborating across these lanes, but even a challenge within science and in clinical research, collaborating, because it gets to kind of what Rodney mentioned of 5% of the people do 95% of the work. So then you get bad feelings, and people are like, well, they're involved in this, but they're not really doing anything. And so it's hard. But one of the things that a lot of people are saying to do, and people are doing, is upfront, what are the goals? What's the output? What is your role in the group? And we're doing this. We have this U.E.1 grant for outcome measures novel outcome measures in CDKL5. Part of the PI team, but we're trying to get all the different sites to get more involved and more active by saying, what project does anyone want to lead? What data does one to put out? Where do you want to be the first author on this paper, as opposed to just going along for the ride? And so trying to entice people in to the collaboration, to get more active in the collaboration, is a challenge, because we're not funding it the way we should be funding it. People are busy, and we realize they're super busy, but we're still asking them to do more. So, it's hard, and a lot of scientific collaborations go nowhere, right? They say, well, we're going to collaborate on this, and then it just doesn't really go anywhere. So I don't have a good answer to you, Vanessa. I wish I did, but I think again, what's everyone's roles? What are the expectations of your output? And are you reaching the milestones and reaching the things you're supposed to be doing, and keeping that up front and on the table so that we know where everyone sits in that collaboration, I think is the best way to get a collaboration to go forward. But it's a challenge. It's not easy. I don't know if, Ronnie, you want to?
Well, I actually wanted to ask you a question. So, gosh, a long time ago, and Vanessa, I don't know if you've heard of this, but there were some pretty significant patient-driven research efforts with multiple researchers, and part of the requirement was milestone, like you got paid on milestones, and you got paid on sharing and working collaboratively with the other researchers. So it forced that everything that we know really needs to happen, and I'm curious about if you've ever been in an arrangement like that, or what do you think about something?
Yeah, no, so as a whole, the NIH, for a lot of the more clinical multi-center studies, have went away from funding effort and saying, oh, you get half a coordinator and you get this and you get that, to funding production. So for every patient that you enroll, for every subject you enroll, you get X dollars if you successfully enter the data and incorporate the data. And so that's good, right? It motivates people. But the downside of that, which I think people are learning, is that if you don't have enough to start, then that energy of activation is lacking, that amount that you need to get going. So there needs to kind of be a balance of, funding a foundation amount so that then they can contribute and get towards those milestones and reach the milestones. Because without it, you often can never even get to that first milestone that you need to get. And this is where I think, as clinician scientists, we need to figure out we need to be honest and say, we can't do this without this. We want to do it, but we can't do it. And I think too often than not, we're all just like, yeah, we'll do it. And then we fail because we don't have what we need to do it. And I think even within the collaboration, that everyone says they're going to collaborate, they're going to contribute, and then one part or two parts don't contribute because they didn't have what they needed in the first place to get it done. And that becomes hard,
It seems like the trend here is about speaking and sitting in truth, right? Like you need to be honest up front with what you can and can't do, what you need. We need to be honest about, the approach, what our expectations are, and
and it's uncomfortable sometimes to ask for things that you don't think you're going to get, or that you don't want to ask of people because you think, oh, this is a small little foundation, they can't do it. But I think you need to be honest about what you can do, and don't ask for half if you're not going to do the work, because then half that money just went to waste.
Right. And I will say, even just to piggyback off that really, really quickly, even in, you don't want to ask, I think just to kind of remove some of the pressure that I put on everybody as far as like asking for what you need, I think there's the other side of it. If you see someone with a need, I think you should not avoid trying to be the person who fills it for them. And so I thought that was just a great segue to bring that out.
Well, Sarita, before you also said find somebody else to help you, like network and find somebody else. There's things like what Dr. Marsh was saying, like that entropy to get started in these spaces for research data specifically. I think I was doing my interview, but you mentioned the commission, right, Nicole? So there's these things like there's shared infrastructure where that buy-in, that infrastructure is already there that you could tap into that you might not know about. Like knocking on the door and saying, you've already done this. Can I join you? Or how did you do it? What was the way you went about it was really important. And we're finding that in this space, that offering that up, it reduces the burden on clinicians. It reduces the burden on their administrators. It reduces the burden on all of the things that kind of like get that going, because boy, howdy, is that the most painful part. Like once it's going, it's not very painful, but getting there is just the worst. So I think finding other people in your network is really important. Like, back to your point from before, it's really important to say, even if they're outside of your network, but they've done something similar, connecting is really, really the key.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really great perspective to have. I think, you know, most people, I would say, aren't looking to reinvent something that's already present and working well. You know, that doesn't mean that, you know, in its current form is exactly what you need. You may need to bring it in and tweak it a little bit for your goals, but I agree, if there's something that's already there, I think we should explore it as organizations. I think if you're on the outside and you see that that's something that we're trying to delve into, for sure you share it to see if it's something that we can work with. I'm a work smarter, not harder kind of person. You know, if there's something present, I want to see how that model fits into what we're trying to accomplish before you just jump in and start fresh with something.
I have a comment. I'm Stephanie with the Snow Foundation. I think that researchers need to collaborate more with patient organizations in grant writing. I know there's the Chan Zuckerberg grant that just came out, and I'm working with Washington University School of Medicine, and they've actually included us on the grant. I think patient organizations need to reach out to their researchers and say, can you include me on a grant? Can you put, you know, can I get 5% of what you're asking for, or can I get 20% and then I'll help you, but then in turn you can help me. For 10 years, I supported big institutions, and they never gave anything back to my tiny little foundation. And it was, I think our era is now including patient organizations with the opportunity to be on the same grant. So just if you guys are here, patient organizations are here, don't be afraid to say, hey, if you write this grant, can you include me? Or look for grants that you can co-write together, and therefore you're getting funding. So.
Well,
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, Stephanie, I mean, seriously, because they can't do it without you, right? They
Right.
need patients at the table for this. So you should be at the table as part of this.
And at the
Of course,
table,
yeah.
right, and at the table in this scenario means being compensated. I mean, you know, you've helped develop whatever they are submitting this grant for. You have clearly some buy-in, you're vested, then you should receive a portion of that. And of course, you work with that researcher and that team or whomever that is to decide and agree contractually what that should look like. But I don't think you should ever enter into an agreement where the benefit isn't equally distributed. That doesn't mean that the amounts are equal, but the benefit of this project, it should be equal for all parties vested. So I agree 100%.
Well, if I could just add, so back to like what we said before about, you know, how to package some of this stuff, like, so you are, as a business, right, providing time, it's your time, it's probably marketing and outreach support, it is communication, it's, right, so now that 5% that you're asking for isn't just because I'm a patient org and I deserve it, right?
Right,
It
that's
is
right.
because you are playing a business role, right, and a very important one as part of the success of that grant. So framing it in a way that, you know, could make it way easier to get some of that funding, right? Because you are doing work, you are doing outreach, and so. Yeah,
It's about knowing your worth, right? What you bring to the table.
No, I agree.
Any other questions? We have 1 minute left.
I'll give you a quick question. And it occurred to me that it should be changeable so that, you know how you get the alternate route? You can save 5 minutes by taking this route instead.
Yeah.
I would just like to know, given all the changes that we're seeing in research, if you were going to design a roadmap, what would you like it to include? That's a question for all of you.
I mean, that's a pretty big ask right now.
I don't think we could finish
sketch
that in
that
1
bad
minute.
boy out.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a minute for that.
Right.
Yeah.
So
gonna say, does anyone?
Yes, we need that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That will be the next topic here
Quick,
in the
quick,
summit.
quick answer for me is I would want the roadmap to include the patient perspective. You know, I don't want it to say patient-centric or patient voice, but patients aren't included in that. So I would want it to clearly include patients and patient organizations, like the example she just gave.
I think more of a menu, you know, as a menu of things that you can do and a potential order of those things rather than a linear process, right? Because I just don't think this is a linear process. But a question to the group, does anyone ever say, yes, I want to go 5 minutes slower when Google Maps asks you that?
Yeah, and I would just say, you know what, we need to map this to, you know, early stage research, preclinical, you know, all the way through. You know, what happens now with cell and gene therapy and long-term follow-up, and just the role of the ecosystem, right? Generally, you know, and in like who, what, where, when, why in those, right? Like, you know, in our world right now with RX, it's about data. Okay, so what role does that play throughout that research continuum? You know, what do you need? Who needs it? What does it need to look like? How, right? So it's just so that you kind of have a roadmap of like, you know, what, when do you need, what type of data do you need for disease progression and characterization models? Why is that important? Okay, who wants that data then when you have that? How are they going to use it? So I think that there's just a lot. Like, this is complex, but I think it needs to be mapped to that continuum.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you would be reaching out to Eric, in what capacity, you know, versus at what point does biopharma care, right? And, yeah.
A
Yeah,
little
that was one of
segment.
the recommendations from yesterday was having some kind of SOP or guidelines or some kind of instructions template. But there is an interesting roadmap that NIH NCATS, and we have a representative from NCATS here, they have that maybe would be worthwhile looking and revising, right? As they had a roadmap, the 4D, I think it was called, or 4, I forgot the name of it.
Yeah, I forget what it's
But
called,
you could
yeah.
go online at the NCATS website and you can find it there. But it did go through the end-to-end process from preclinical, like very concept, right, stage to the end goal. Yeah, it would be interesting to revisit in
You
2022.
could throw some of those lessons learned in there too.
Yeah.
If this
Yeah.
happens, then this.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was great. I
Thank
hope
you.
you all enjoyed